There is no multi-sig controlling what the code is on the relay chain. People from all over the world, from lots of different companies, they are actually getting paid by the treasury itself. So once again, that sort of snake eating its own tail. I've been involved in Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, blockchain technology since 2012. Before coming and working on Polkadot and at Web3 Foundation, I was a lecturer at the University of Pittsburgh in the computer science department. I actually sort of fell in love with Polkadot specifically after watching a talk by Gavin Wood when he built a blockchain, from scratch from a brand new computer. And I saw that like, wow, that's something cool to experiment with. And the more I played with it, the more I said, I want to be a part of it. So in 2019, I moved to Switzerland and joined Web3 Foundation. I've been working there ever since. Truth is, it's a hard thing philosophically to pin down, but I saw blockchain as a step towards truth. The idea that we could, using a network with no external arbiter, no centralized party, no assumptions of trust, we could come to a decision on what was correct, what was canonical. We can agree on things. And this is what originally got me interested, in Bitcoin, that we could have, some idea where we knew from a currency perspective that there will be this many coins, and we can prove that this will happen. And if a transaction occurs, it can't be censored, and we know that it will occur. We can all agree that it occurred. From the first time, I read the Bitcoin white paper and understood what was going on, and the fact that you could have all of these different computers all across the world, all these different people. And it didn't matter if you were, from Namibia or Poland, or if you were, a king or a pauper or whatever. It didn't matter. If you had a Bitcoin node, you could come to an agreement on like what has actually happened. And this, it just blew my mind. And obviously we've evolved a lot since then. And my job is teaching people, all right, what does this mean? How do you use it? How can you be a part of that? And that's definitely something that I want to keep doing. Polkadot has obviously expanded greatly from when I had joined. Kusama hadn't even launched yet, let alone the Polkadot mainnet. And we did have a lot of builders that were interested, but not nearly as many as we do today. In these early days, it really was a lot of nerds, right? And I say that speaking as a nerd myself. The interfaces often were very technical. Our communication sometimes were very technical because we were trying to bring builders into the ecosystem. But it also meant that there was a lot of there's an impression that Polkadot is just this very, very complex thing. However, what we've seen as we've gotten these builders in, they've simplified a lot of things. A lot of the applications now versus the very early ones in 2019, everything is smoother. The wallets are smoother. They have better UI, better UX. We have very polished end products. Polkadot has become a much smoother experience. And obviously there have been also technical changes. There's been a lot of improvements to the technology in terms of scalability. I'd say this is one big thing. The second big thing is the level of decentralization. So a big change obviously is the governance mechanism for Polkadot. When the network first launched, we had a super user account that could control everything, and that was eventually given up. But there was still a technical committee, there was still an elected council that had very limited powers, but they did have some extra powers. Then with the launch of OpenGov, what we've seen is a move towards this more of a platonic ideal of one dot, one vote. If you have DOT, in your account, you are directing the future of the network. All decisions on the network, every change that is made only can be done through the agreement of the DOT holders. You're in charge of the treasury, right? Of providing funding to different projects that are helping to build the ecosystem. So not just boring, dry technical changes, but also, hey, I would like funds that are in the on-chain DOT treasury to be used for this project or that project or this other project, or to tip somebody who did something cool, or to provide a bounty for some problem that we're seeing in the ecosystem. Web3 Foundation has really worked to ensure that more people in governance get a voice and not just a single group of people. And it's continuing to do this. We're continuing to try to decentralize in all kinds of different ways. So the reason for decentralization is really to ensure that Polkadot is unstoppable, right? In comparison to other blockchains that often have some centralized entity behind them, or some centralized group, like some very small number of people, or a small number of validators that can actually produce blocks and keep the network running. This makes them more fragile in one way or another. So if you have one single point of failure in a system, that means that it is very fragile. And if you have a system that anybody can interact with and there's lots of different entities within the system, from the outside, it often can look like chaos. But really what that means is that it is extremely flexible. If there is a problem, if there's a problem with one entity that drops off the face of the earth for some reason, the network can continue. It's very much like nature. I think crows or pigeons, they're all over the world, every city you go in, right? So even if a meteor hit Denver or something and all the pigeons died, there's gonna be lots of pigeons in London and Cairo and in Istanbul, everywhere. Whereas, if you're some species that is maybe you're an extremely strong or fast species, but you have very limited parameters in which you can live, and you have to live on one particular island in one particular place, it's much more fragile. And there is a time and a place for that in technology, just like there's a time and place for that with nature. But the goal of Polkadot is to be unstoppable. So from a technical perspective of actually keeping the network up and running, we're decentralizing it, ensuring that there are game theoretical reasons for it to be decentralized. It actually makes more sense compared to like Bitcoin, for instance. There's a lot of economy of scale for miners. You see a lot of centralization with mining and mining pools. It's actually the opposite. The incentive in Polkadot is to spread out validators. There's actually some incentives built into the protocol for this. There's different validators that are located in different geographical locations, new versions of the host software, Polkadot host software, not just one version of the software running. From a social perspective, right, we've tried to decentralize and have different groups of people in terms of their backgrounds. From a governance perspective, we want decentralization because it makes sense that you want to spread the power out, right? You want to have a system where anyone can partake in it and make a difference. And that's really hard to do if you're in a system where one entity or some small group of entities has all the power to begin with. We've seen that there are a lot of people who have been participating in governance with small amounts of DOT. However, they're very passionate. They provide a lot. You can tell they put a lot of thought into their decisions. They comment, they ask questions. They're actually reading the proposals, going into detail and asking very probing questions. And we at Web3 Foundation, we thought, wouldn't it make sense is if those people could use some of our DOT to vote, so they have more voting power. And so we started the Decentralized Voices program, which allocates 180,000 KSM of voting power to individuals in the ecosystem that have applied, they had to post their political philosophy, what they'll do, what their opinions were. We've reviewed them and we've delegated our votes to them. Decentralized Voices will actually change the delegations every 3 months to show the community a broad spectrum of these people. It's not to give a lot of power to these people, but rather to have them have some power that they can show what they do with it, essentially. The idea behind this is that not only will these particular people be incentivized to vote, but perhaps others will also delegate to them, right? So that you actually have more people voting, or if you are not interested in voting all the time, but what you may be interested in is saying, oh, this person, I agree with what they vote. I think they're smart. I have similar political philosophy, and so I will just delegate my vote to them. And maybe even I will just delegate on certain things. Like I want to continue to vote on technical proposals, but not on Treasury proposals. And so this person really seems to know what he's talking about with Treasury proposals. I'll delegate to him. So the idea is to kickstart this whole system, right, of others delegating on different tracks. But I also want to say, I think this is a very good idea personally, but it's an experiment. Right? We're trying things out. Maybe there are better ways to do this. I mean, one of the great things about Polkadot, it's made to evolve, right? The way it's designed, it's made to very easily upgrade. And so just like we went from basically a single account being in charge of the system when it first launched, to then having what we call Gov1, where we had an elected council, to OpenGov. Perhaps there will be OpenGov2, or who knows what the name will be in the future. But if we determine either with decentralized voices, like, all right, this isn't working the way we want it to, or we have a better idea, something else we want to try, then we could do that. If we determine the system itself has problems, or just there are better ways to do it, then that's something also that we can do. You had mentioned, right, one dot, one vote, since dot costs money to buy, right? So some people have more of it than others. That this can cause some problems in terms of people having more power than others. So there's been a lot of discussion about how could we do this in a better way, or should we, right? Would a proof of personhood voting system, would that make sense, or would that cause other problems? Because we're sort of balancing two different things here with the network. Is one, like the stability of the network. We don't want to just have pure anarchy every morning. We've got a totally new system up. We also don't want to be just perfectly ossified and never change anything, but rather we want to evolve, figure out what works, and we know that there will be things that work better than others, but figure out what does work, keep that. Things that aren't working as well, get rid of that or change it, and keep moving forward. So I'm not saying Polkadot is perfect, but I think the arc of it bends towards better and better. I think actually what we have is even better than elected representatives. So they are in a sense elected, but unlike elected representatives that, due to just the vagaries of how easy it was to do this in the past, are only elected for very certain terms, generally like 2, 4, 6 years, something like that, very long periods of time. These elected representatives have a very broad mandate, and if I decide halfway through that my elected representative is not doing a good job, it's very difficult generally to recall them or to vote for someone else. However, with a system like this, where I can say, well, I trust this person with Treasury proposals, I trust, but maybe not the really biggest Treasury proposals. I'll do all of those on my own. But technical proposals, I'll send to this person. Administrative proposals, this one. It's more liquid, right? That I can decide on different what we call tracks. Whom I trust. And at any point I could say, like, I no longer trust this person, I'm going to revoke the delegation or change to a different person. So I think it is similar, but I also think that this, in some senses, is an improvement on the traditional voting an elected representative for a specific period of time who will represent me in all cases. And also, it's really, I'm not deciding the representative, right? It's me and everybody else in my district. And so if I'm part of the 49% that voted against somebody, but 51% did vote for this person, then that majority is represented, but I am not. Whereas in this system, I can always be represented. So the DOT token itself is inflationary. So validators that are producing the blocks, they get rewards for doing this. And a portion of those rewards that are created are sent to the Treasury. And so the Treasury is growing with DOT. Basically, as the network continues, a certain percentage of the DOT is being put into the Treasury. The Polkadot Technical Fellowship is who are like the main developers of Polkadot, are funded by the Treasury as well. So there's actually an automated process that converts DOT, swaps it to USDT, and then is used to pay the main developers of the system. So it very much is an internally a cohesive system that, as the network continues, the DOT is created as a natural byproduct of the system continuing, of blocks continuing, and we're using that, this like natural byproduct of blocks being produced to put funds in the Treasury and using those to continue the growth of the network. And so that means that the network will keep continuing, and it's this like very self-sustaining process. What are the problems right now of large entities gathering all of your data? I actually heard just this morning on a podcast about Microsoft bought the rights to use all of Reddit as training data for their AIs. Like, I'm a frequent poster on Reddit. Like, all right, well, Reddit just took my data, that I've been contributing to for all of this time, and then they're going to make, I think it was $60 million or something off of that, and now it's going to be in an AI training set somewhere. All right, I didn't have any control over that. And sort of alternatively, if Reddit wanted to shut down tomorrow, then it's gone. We'll never see it again. Maybe Microsoft takes that data. And this happens, right? Websites go down all the time. And a lot of times there isn't a way to back this up. And there are a lot of people that get kicked off these platforms for no specified reason. We see this happening also. People have been not just like the centralized digital platforms you're probably thinking of, but also like the banking system. It's pretty common to see somebody on Twitter or something or saying that their bank has just ceased. They said, we're releasing you as a customer, and there's nothing. It doesn't say why. There's nothing you can do about it. People don't realize like these connections, these social connections that you may have on a social media site, these connections with the banking system. There are a lot of these interactions with other people and other systems that are very vulnerable because they're not decentralized. There is a sort of default digital feudalism that exists right now, and it's much more subtle than the old aristocratic feudalism, but definitely exists there. So ownership is also extremely important, right? So this actually is one of the founding goals of Web3 Foundation, is to create a decentralized internet where people can own their own data. And we've seen, we know that this is a problem, right? There are all kinds of regulations that are out there. The EU has done very famously, but the US, lots of other countries as well. But I think that trying to approach it from this regulatory perspective, the approach that they're trying to fight against, they're trying to fight against code with law. All right. And I think a better solution is to fight against this bad code with good code. I think historically, this is what we have seen is much more powerful, right? When encryption was outlawed, right, in the U.S., like you couldn't export encryption, and one way of stopping this, was there were these regulations to try to stop encrypting things. But what really caused this to go away was Phil Zimmerman writing PGP, right? Code can be used to solve problems, and then once people see what the benefits are, they can move, they can make their own decisions. The blockchain world can be very insular. We just kind of, I'm guilty of this myself as well. Sometimes if I talk about a key pair or encryption or UTXO, or I use some technical gibberish, we need to remember that we're not doing this just for other nerds, right? We're not just doing this for other engineers or other researchers. We are doing this for the world. We're doing this for everybody, and so we need to talk to them in a way that they understand and give them things that are useful for them. When computers, right, were first started coming into all of our homes, and people were like, well, why would I want something that calculates numbers really quickly? That's not how it was sold to them, right? But rather, like, this is something that allows you to write email and stay in touch with your friends, and this is something that allows you, to write papers or play games or whatever. And I think similarly with blockchain technology, I think what we show is this is something that allows you to have more self-sovereignty. This is something that allows you to own your data. This is something that allows you to do things the way you want to do them and not the way that the people who own, large tech companies want you to do it.
Central chain of Polkadot. It provides economic security and interoperability to the chains that connect to it. There are 49 different parachains operating right now on Polkadot, and we are really working on decentralizing the humans that are involved.